Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're going to be making some real southern fried chicken. Let me go over all these ingredients first because there's quite a few of them, and then we'll talk about all of them and different things you can do. I've got a cup of buttermilk and 2 cups of milk, a cup and a half of all-purpose flour, half a cup of cornstarch, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, about 2 tablespoons of honey, 1 egg, a teaspoon of cinnamon, a tablespoon and a half of onion powder, just about half teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 2 teaspoons of salt, and a teaspoon and a half of black pepper. And of course, I have my chicken, and I've got some oil to fry it in. Now this recipe will work with any chicken at all. Bone in, boneless, tenders, legs, thighs, wings, breasts, whatever you're gonna make, this recipe will work. And I'm going to show you how to get your chicken breasts done. If you're doing bone-in whole chicken breasts and you want to fry them, it is very, very hard to get them done without burning them. But when we finish this video, you'll be able to do it without burning it. So let's kind of get started and combine some of these ingredients so we've got room to work here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is combine almost all of my spices. I'm going to combine my salt and my pepper, put my cayenne pepper in it, my onion powder in it, and my cinnamon in it. Now these are my basic spices that I'm going to use to season my chicken. Lots of folks I know like garlic on their chicken. If you want to use garlic, save the garlic to go in your breading. Don't put it in this because half of this is going to go in the marinade, and the purpose for the marinade is to tenderize the chicken, and garlic kind of works against that process. So you want to wait until you've marinated it and let it soak, and then you can add a little garlic in your breading if you want garlic in. So combine your spices fairly well. And like I said, you're going to put half of them in your marinade and you're going to put half of them in your breading. And I know that looks like a lot of salt and stuff, but this is not all going to be on your chicken. You're not going to use all your breading, and your marinade, most of it's going to be left in the bowl after you take the chicken out. So even though it looks like a whole bunch of spices and it looks like it's going to be way over seasoned and have so many spices in it, you know, that you're just not even going to be able to eat it, that's not the case because it doesn't stay on there. The cinnamon is kind of something that I do sometimes. I don't always do that, and it is definitely optional, but cinnamon is one of those spices that's really, really good on chicken and pork. Any way you fix it, if you want something with just a slightly different flavor, or you want people to say, my gosh, that was good, what in the world was that flavor in there? Add a little bit of cinnamon in your chicken and pork chops and stuff. It's something different, and you don't have to do it every time, but it really is good on those meats, and it is something different, something that people will ask about. Your secret ingredient. Okay, once we've got our spices combined, we're going to go ahead and mix up our marinade because we want to get this chicken in and let it soak for a while. For the marinade, we're going to put our egg in and our buttermilk. And the buttermilk really will flavor the chicken and it will tenderize the chicken. Lots of folks have commented about adding vinegar to milk or lemon juice to milk. You can use regular milk and lemon juice in this, or regular milk and vinegar in this. I would use the lemon juice over the vinegar. If you have regular milk and you don't have buttermilk, use a cup of regular milk and a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. Put your lemon juice in your milk first and it'll kind of go ahead and curdle it. But the acid in the lemon juice or the vinegar will do a very similar thing. The process is very similar to what buttermilk does. So you can change it. If you don't have buttermilk, you can use lemon juice or vinegar. Okay, I'm going to whisk that stuff together just a little bit. Make sure my egg is busted up good. Honey is also optional. I like just a little bit of sweetness in my chicken and my pork chops and stuff like that. I just think it really accents the flavor, it enhances it, and it makes it much better. And if you put it in the marinade, it's going to kind of go into the center of the meat. But like I said, it's optional. If you don't want it, don't put it in there. It's another one of those flavors that will be detectable. It not only adds a little tiny bit of sweetness, but honey adds a really good flavor. And people will ask about it. What in the world did that have in it? Okay, and now you want to add just about half of your spices. Maybe not quite, because you're going to want about as many of your spices in your breading as you have in your marinade, and then you want to save just a little bit to go in your gravy at the end. That's probably good right there. And give that a good mix. Okay, once you got that all mixed up, you're going to go ahead and add your cut up chicken into your marinade. And like I said, any chicken will work in this. Anything from chicken tenders to whole chicken breasts. You can do chicken legs, backs, thighs, whatever. And I have pretty much a whole cut up chicken here. I went to the grocery store yesterday looking for a whole chicken to make fried chicken with, and I could not find one in 3 grocery stores. So I had to buy wings and legs and backs and thighs and breasts. I do want to show you this real quick right here. The little tip of the wing, you want to cut that off before you make fried chicken out of chicken wings, because this little tip will burn and it won't be good. By the time you get everything done and the rest of your wing done, that tip is going to burn and it's just not going to be good. And you can cut it off with a sharp knife or a pair of kitchen scissors, just whatever you want. But all you're going to do is throw all your chicken in there. Once you get the chicken all in your marinade, toss it around in there a little bit, coat it all good. It's a good idea to have this in an airtight bowl because you're going to put it in the refrigerator 4 hours, maybe even overnight. A minimum, you want to marinate it for 2 hours because you really want these flavors to get in the chicken, especially if you have bigger pieces like a chicken breast. If you don't marinate it long enough, the center of your breast is going to be tough and it's not going to have any flavor in it. So make sure it's, like I said, all coated good. Seal it up, stick it in the refrigerator. Overnight is best. You can do this on a Saturday night, put it in the refrigerator, and then have fried chicken for Sunday dinner. Once you get this in here and you get it covered up, you do want to take a minute and clean everything up. Wash your hands good. You don't want to cross-contaminate stuff. Okay, now we're going to mix up our breading. You want to have your breading in a pretty good size bowl, or you can mix it in a plastic bag, like a Ziploc bag, so you can kind of shake the chicken up and coat it good, or do it in a big wide bowl, kind of like this, because you're going to be rolling that chicken around in there and you don't want to get it all over your kitchen. So we're going to use our 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour and our 1/2 cup of cornstarch. And we've talked about what cornstarch does to fried foods in a lot of videos. It really makes fried foods crispy. And if you need a gluten-free batter for your chicken or whatever else, I highly recommend potato flour. It works really good and it adds a lot of flavor to fried foods. And sometimes I use it even when, you know, we don't need gluten-free, but sometimes I'll use potato flour or even instant potato flakes. If you can't get potato flour, instant potato flakes will also work. And I'll use that instead of regular flour sometimes, just for something different, because it does add so much flavor. And you're also going to put your baking powder in here, and baking powder will help make that breading thick on your fried chicken. And we're going to put almost all the spices in here. We're going to save just a little of them, like I said, for the gravy. That's plenty for the gravy, maybe more than enough. I've probably got half teaspoon left in there. And the only other ingredient I have here that I haven't used is I've got my 2 cups of milk. Now when we're done with our fried chicken, we're going to drain the grease out of our pan and make some country gravy with the milk. If you want a brown gravy to go with yours, you would need 2 cups of chicken broth, and the process is the same. But I'm going to set my milk aside here just to keep it out of the way until we are ready for gravy. And I'm going to go ahead and set my spices aside too. Now kind of whisk this all together so that your spices are evenly distributed in your flour, and your cornstarch is evenly distributed, and baking powder. Okay, now at this point we're ready for our marinated chicken, and we're going to take our marinated chicken and we're going to bread it. It pretty much looks the same after it's marinated as it does before it goes in the refrigerator. You can't really tell a whole lot of difference in it. As you're pulling it out, go ahead and kind of slide it around a little bit in there and pull some of the pieces that are deeper down in it out first, because they're going to have more spices on them. And it's a good idea that while it's in the refrigerator marinating, like if you put it in on a Saturday night, maybe stir it Sunday morning before you head to church, or if you're just doing it for 3 or 4 hours before you're going to cook it, give it a little stir about every hour to redistribute the spices and make sure everything's coated good. We're going to start with our bigger pieces, our chicken breast, and coat it first, because once you coat it, you want to let it sit for a few minutes before you start frying it. And we want to cook the chicken breasts longer because obviously they are bigger and it's going to take longer to cook them. And I've got 2 racks out here. My other one's sitting over there. I'm going to coat this, sit it on one rack, and let it sit before I start frying it. And then as soon as I take it out of the pan, I'm going to put it on my other rack and put it in the oven, a preheated 350-degree oven, to finish cooking. Because if I try to fry this chicken breast all the way done in my oil, it's going to burn. And you might say, well, they fry it all the way done in restaurants. Well, in chicken restaurants, they have pressure fryers. And they do make such a beast for home use, but I'm not sure I'd trust a pressure fryer. And they're pretty expensive too. Make sure you get it all coated really good and then just sit it aside so that it looks kind of like that. And you just keep going, working your way from the biggest pieces down to the smallest ones. I do the wings last because they're kind of the smallest. I'll do the thighs and the legs and everything before them, and like I said, start with the breast because I'm going to fry them last, so they're going to have plenty of time to sit there and rest. And letting them sit and rest once you've breaded them is very, very important. If you take it straight from the breading and drop it in the oil, you're going to lose all your breading and all your flavor. So you want to give it a few minutes just to rest. Okay, now I'm going to save this. I'm not going to put it away, but I'm saving it until my gravy. I'm going to use a little bit of this in my gravy. And then what's left when I'm done with my gravy, I'm going to do away with it because it has the chicken in it. And it's not really safe to keep it unless you're going to be making more fried chicken the next day. And if you're going to be doing that, you need to wrap up this bowl and put it in the refrigerator. And it'll keep for a day or two, but not very long, not any longer than what your raw chicken would last. So, but you can use it today in your gravy today because we're going to cook it. So it's okay to use it. Just sit it over with the rest of your gravy ingredients. Now I'm going to get rid of this and clean everything up and wash my hands again. Okay, at this point we want to get our oil preheating. You never want to add fried chicken to cold oil. If you do, it's going to stick every single time. You want to make sure this pan is good and hot, probably around 400 degrees if you're using a thermometer. I usually don't. I drop a little of my breading or something in it to check it, and once it starts bubbling, then I know it's ready to use. And you also want to go ahead and turn your oven on and get it preheating to 350 degrees. And you're going to need a rack. If you just lay your chicken down on a pan and then put it in the oven, it's going to stick to the pan and it's going to be soggy. If you take it out of here, put it on here on a rack and put it in the oven and let it finish cooking in the middle so that your chicken breast is nice and done and tender. On this rack, it's going to continue to crisp and it's going to drain, so it's not going to be greasy and soggy when you're ready to eat it. And I use my old cookie sheets for this, and I line them with foil just to make it easy to clean up, because this is kind of a lengthy process, and if you can save some time in the end cleaning up the mess, well, that's a must do for a recipe like this. I've got some tongs I'm going to use to turn it, and I've also got my straight spatula again. Now, in a perfect world, your fried chicken is never going to stick no matter what kind of pan you use. But in the real world, sometimes stuff sticks. And if you have a spatula with a nice straight edge and you get something like a piece of fried chicken that's stuck, you can just slide your spatula up under it along the bottom of your pan and it will release it, and then you can turn it without losing your breading. If you're using a non-stick pan, you want to make sure, of course, it's not a metal spatula. You want to use a nylon spatula, but I'm using my cast iron, so I've got my metal one. You need quite a bit of oil to fry chicken in because you really want that oil to come up at least halfway over your chicken. And I've got about 2 cups in here, which gives me close to ½ an inch of oil in my pan before I even add the chicken. And you can see there that is not sizzling, so my oil is not hot enough to add it. You don't want to put too much breading in there to test your oil, because that is going to end up burning way before we get the chicken done, that little crumble that I put in there. But a little crumble ain't going to hurt nothing. Okay, my pan is starting to sizzle now, so I'm going to start adding my chicken, the breast first, and I am going to put it in bone side down. And I'm going to cook it 5 or 6 minutes bone side down, and you're going to have to adjust the heat as the chicken cooks to keep the oil hot, but not, you don't want it to get too hot. Now, as tempting as it is, while this sits here and fries, you don't really want to be moving it around a whole lot. You don't want to be trying to lift it up and look at it, because that's going to knock your breading off. Let it just sit there and fry, and when it starts to get done on the bottom, you'll be able to just touch it a little bit and it'll move. Now, this chicken's pretty big, especially that breast, so it's not really going to float, but it is going to be really, really easy to move, and it won't be stuck to the bottom of the pan. It will release, and when you first add it into the pan, it is going to stick just a little bit for a few minutes, and then when it cooks, it'll let go and you'll be able to turn it without losing your breading. Okay, now after about 5 minutes, we're going to go ahead and turn this chicken over, and we're going to cook it another 3 or 4 minutes on this side, on the second side. If you had breaded this and then just thrown it right in the pan, all the breading would have fallen off and been in the pan. Now, I do have some stuff getting in my pan. My pan's a little bit cloudy. That's normal. Your oil is going to get cloudy. But you shouldn't have big chunks of breading falling off in here and burning. That should not be the case at all, no matter how much chicken you have to fry. If you let it rest and you wait until your oil is hot to put your chicken in and start cooking it. I did have to turn the temperature down a little bit after my chicken really started frying good. When I first put it in there, the chicken cooled the oil back down that I had preheated. But then after a minute, when the chicken started to get hot, the oil started to get too hot and it started frying too fast. You need to keep an eye on that. You want to keep it frying at a good rate, kind of like this. But if it starts to sizzle and pop too much, turn it down a little bit. You don't want to grease fire. You don't want that oil boiling over, because it will boil over and it'll get down in your stove and then you'll have a fire. Okay, after about 8 or 9 minutes in the pan, the chicken is crispy and it's ready to come out and put it in the oven. Now, as soon as you take one piece out, you want to put another piece in, because if you don't, your pan will get too hot way too fast. And if you're just cooking little pieces like legs, if your pan is big enough to hold all of your chicken, you can cook it just in the pan and get it done. But if you're cooking the big breasts, going in the oven is kind of a must, because you're not going to be able to get it done in the center without burning the outside. And fried chicken was probably my biggest battle when I first got married. Getting it seasoned right, I overspiced it. It was awful. And then I couldn't seem to get it done without burning it. Well, somehow I didn't pay attention in the kitchen, I guess. I did not catch the oven part when Granny and Dot and Mama and everybody was making fried chicken, and I wasn't putting it in the oven. I was trying to fry it all in the pan, and it just doesn't work. I thought they were just putting it in the oven to keep it warm. No, they were putting it in the oven to finish cooking it. I mean, I saw them putting it in the oven, but I said I thought it was just to keep it warm. It's not just to keep it warm, but it does keep it warm. I mean, if you're doing a whole big bunch of chicken legs, you can fry them. Not like this is not super crispy and not super brown or super done. So when I put it in the oven, it's going to be able to continue to cook without burning. So if you've got 30 chicken legs, you're not going to be able to get them all in your skillet at once. So cook them about like this, 9-10 minutes, and then put them in the oven and let them finish cooking. I never use a meat thermometer. I always tear or cut into the meat to see if it's done, because with a meat thermometer, unless you get it in exactly the right spot, you're not going to get an accurate reading. The food safety people say you should be able to put a meat thermometer into the thickest part of the breast and it should read 150 degrees. You have to find the exact center of the breast in order for that method to work. But if you tear into it and it's white and it's tender and it's not rubbery, it's definitely done. So anyway, I'm going to put this in the oven because I know that big old breast definitely didn't cook in 9 minutes. Okay, we got our chicken all fried and it's in the oven finishing cooking and staying warm. We're going to make our gravy. And I've just got a little bit of my breading left here, a couple tablespoons, and my spices that I saved. And I've saved a little bit of grease, and I'm going to add my flour into my grease and cook it. Now, you need enough flour to soak up pretty much all the grease. And you do want to make sure you cook it, because you'll have a flour taste in your gravy if you don't. And, we had that raw chicken in there, so you definitely want to cook it good. Now, once you get your flour in there, cook it until it kind of gets brown. And as you're doing that, like we used the breading that we had left over from our chicken in here, so there's a few little lumps in it. Go ahead and take your fork or your whisk or whatever you're stirring it with and kind of mash those lumps out. Okay, that looks pretty good. Once your flour's brown, just pour your milk in. And if you want the brown gravy instead of the country gravy, you just need 2 cups of broth instead of 2 cups of milk. Whenever you're making gravy, it's generally a good idea to stir it constantly. That'll keep it from getting lumps in it. And you want to make sure you add all your flour before you add your milk, because if you don't, if you try to add it to it after your milk gets hot, it's going to be lumpy, and it's also not going to be cooked, so your flavor's not going to be as good. And at this point, all you're going to do is stir this and heat it back to a boil. Okay, my gravy's just about back to a boil. You'll see it start to thicken up as it starts to boil. Whether or not you even make gravy or what kind of gravy you make, you know, that's up to you. And it's also what kind of dinner you're making. Fried chicken makes a really good picnic. You can make some coleslaw and tater salad to go with it and take it on a picnic. You can do the Sunday dinner with the gravy and some biscuits and or rolls and mashed taters and stuff. And it's an iconic Southern food. And I know that I have a lot of dishes over here, but you're not going to have as many dishes as I've got, because you're not going to have everything all spread out when you make it at home. And it doesn't take that long. I mean, you're looking at spending a little bit of time in the kitchen, but the part over the skillet where you're actually frying it is really the only labor-intensive part. And you have enough time while you're frying it to get the rest of your dinner together, your mashed taters and everything. And you're going to be doing, you know, all the marinating and stuff the day before, so it's not going to be the mess that I have here. And now that you know how to do it, you know all the steps, you know that that oven is not just to keep it warm, it's actually part of the cooking process. And you won't overspice it and stuff. Give it a try. It's not that hard once you know the process. And hopefully it won't take you as long as it took me to get the hang of it. I don't know why it seemed like that was one of the very hardest things for me to actually master when I first started cooking. And I think a lot of it was because I was trying to rush it. And like I said, I was overdoing spices. And then I didn't understand that the oven was part of the process, not just a warmer. So if you know that stuff, you shouldn't have a dozen bad batches of fried chicken. Your very first batch of fried chicken should be an absolute masterpiece. All right, my gravy's starting to boil, and I'm going to keep stirring it just a minute until it starts to thicken. And once it gets to this point, you want to make sure you scrape the bottom, because if you don't, it's going to burn. And the stuff that's forming on the bottom is what's going to thicken it as it boils. And you don't want to boil it until it gets as thick as you want it to be when you serve it. You just want to boil it until it very first starts to get thick. When your fork starts to leave a trail in it, that's when you want to cut the heat off, because it's going to keep thickening as it cools. And I've just about got it there now. You don't need to add anything else to it if it's too thin when it starts to boil. You just need to keep it cooking a minute or two longer and keep stirring it, and it'll thicken right on up. Okay, it's starting to really get thick around the edges. My fork's leaving a nice trail, and my bubbles are getting thick. So I've cooked this long enough. I'm gonna cut it off and get my chicken out of the oven. And now it's all nice and done and tender, and it won't be burned because I didn't try to cook it all in the oil in the frying pan. It's all sizzling, nice and golden brown, nice and crispy. All my breading's still on it. And you can see over here I got this big old empty space on my pan. Brett said he'd smelled it cooking and heard me talk about chicken until he had to eat. So I had to feed him before I even got the gravy made. Give this a try. Like I said, it's really not that hard. And if you know all the steps, you won't have to make it 24 times before you get it right. And don't stop by the Colonel's place on the way home. Make your own and have your own Sunday dinner, traditional Southern fried chicken, at least once in a while. You don't have to do it every week, but once in a while, your family will really appreciate it, and it will be one of those meals that you can make memories around. I want to thank you so much for joining us in the Hillbilly Kitchen, and if you have not already, I want to ask you to please click like and subscribe before you leave. And until next time, remember to put God first.